Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Mershazadeh.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
And you're listening to the What Matters podcast, and our mission
to spotlight top RIAs, wealth managers, and investment professionals who are redefining wealth management.
Join us as we dive into their journey, strategies, and insights.
Whether you're an investor or an inspiring pro, this is for you.
Get ready for impactful conversations on the What Matters podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mershazadeh.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
Ashley, we're going to have to start that one over.
That's fine. I'm just going to mark the clip and then you can just start.
Ashley, real quick, on today, on this right here, all it has is okay, here we go. My apologies. I'm not used to doing it on my computer. So it's marked. I can go?
Yep.
Okay. And today we're honored to have Lori Van Dusen, founder and CEO of LVW.
Mike, why don't you start from the top just to make it fluid?
You got it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mershazadeh.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
And today we're honored to have Lori Van Dusen, founder and CEO of LVW Advisors out of Pittsford, New York, joining us. Thank you for joining us today.
I'd love to talk with you guys. So thanks for inviting me.
Lori has over 30 years of experience in the industry and is an advocate for client-focused strategies. She has been recognized with numerous accolades and is the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Running with Grace. Thanks for joining us today, Lori.
Pleasure.
Well, it's fantastic to have you on the show with us. Let's dive right in. So let's start by exploring your impressive journey in the financial services industry. Can you share with us and our listeners how you began your journey in the industry in your career and what led you to founding LVW Advisors?
Yeah, I started in 1987. I was hired by Lehman Brothers, which was really the Shearson Lehman Brothers side, but I had the opportunity to look at those documents a while ago and realized Lehman Brothers hired me, 1987. Went to the Shearson side and started in the World Trade Center with a training class of about 299 men. No, sorry, let me correct that. 298 men, young men. And, that was, the kind of, no finance experience, no formal degrees in finance, just, showed up and passed all the tests, so they were forced to hire me. And I started, like everybody else, dialing for dollars. And I tell people this story, a lot of times. I've told in the past, but I was like, okay, what do I do? I don't have any degree in finance. I don't know anything. So I decided that I would cold call the AARP list. So I cold called the AARP list in the Northeast because I figured, these are people over whatever age. They must, more likely demographically to have money. And these are the people I want to talk with. So that's what I did. That's where I started. And I soon realized that the whole industry was kind of upside down. I didn't understand it. I didn't think it was right. I thought there were a lot of conflicts of interest. I ethically didn't like it. But more than anything, I thought it was a dumb business model. I thought it was just really dumb that people got up every day and decided how they were going to make a living. And the ethical part, the part that really bothered me, is it didn't matter how the client did. It was more about just, dialing for dollars, making money, selling a product, selling a stock. And so I just decided I'm not going to do it this way. And it wasn't anything like, I didn't think I was starting, a revolution or anything. I just was like, I'm not going to do this way because it doesn't feel right. So I would just call people, and if they didn't hang up on me, I would just ask them about their life, about their kids, about what they cared about what they did with their money, what they were frustrated with, what their experiences have been. I just solved problems. And I would close, if I got this far, with just, closing for an appointment to, get in the room. Because I knew once I was in the room, I could probably make a difference. And so that's what I did. I never sold anything on the phone. I just closed for a meeting. And then pretty soon thereafter, I started to get, some positive traction, and people were starting to notice. And then I started to do seminars and I started to teach. And I figured if I could get in front of bigger groups of people and solve problems, that was probably a good thing. So I come from a music background, a performance background. So I was composed. I had a graduate degree when I started, but it wasn't in finance, it was in education from Harvard. So I just had this weird skill set of things, and I knew that I could learn the business. So I was not discouraged about not knowing anything. I thought, I'm going to learn about the people that I'm in front of. I'm going to learn about the financial solutions, and I'm going to solve problems. And so it was, by the end of, I think, 3 years, I was probably the top of that training program, if not the number one producer. I was up there. And I was clearly the only woman. So I kind of stood out a little bit, and people thought, what is this person doing and why is she here? And one of my first large clients actually referred me into an institution that they sat on the board of. And they said to me, you do this really great job with our family and whatever. Have you ever thought about doing this actually an endowment at Cornell University? It isn't the Cornell University endowment, but was another one that is, was a research institute. So they said, we're looking for an advisor and whatever. So I showed up at a board meeting, and they were interviewing other people, and they ended up hiring me. And that's kind of the origin of it all. It was, I really embraced what's now called a fiduciary model. But I was in a wirehouse. And then I brought the business out of a wirehouse setting. So Shearson Lehman Brothers became Morgan Stanley. Right before the Morgan Stanley merger, I had $5.5 billion under management. And I ported that out with my great team of people into an independent RIA. And that failed epically. I was sued by Citigroup at the same time, which owned Smith Barney, the firm I left. I ultimately won and they lost, but I also joined a failing business. And finally negotiated my exit after that lawsuit concluded. So that's a lot to unpack, but that's my origin story. That's how I ended up.
A couple questions there. Yeah.
So I ended up in RIA. I didn't even know what an RIA was. I just knew that I wanted to be independent and in a fiduciary model, and no one else was doing it. So there you go.
Wow. So when you said first, when you said you come from let's go back to the music background. Do you play instruments, dance? You got pipes?
Yeah, I was a singer. When I was, a teenager, someone figured out I could sing, and I was in a great music program in public school. And then my grandfather, who was a very enlightened person, he was our father figure. I have a twin brother too. He was our father figure, and he knew I could sing. And so he brought me to the Eastman School of Music after school every day. So I went to public school during the day, and went to voice and piano lessons after school.
Really cool.
And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about discipline, composure, pattern recognition, a lot of things that have helped in this career for sure.
Out of curiosity, are you any good on the piano?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Because
my son is. I have a son who's brilliant. He's a musician in LA, but I am not. No. I did have a decent voice, though.
Because right between Ashley and I, right between us, there is a beautiful piano that I built several years ago. That wow. It's made out of acrylic, and I've had so many lessons, and I still don't know how to play it. So
I'll have to send my son over. He's really good. Yeah, he's amazing.
So let me ask you this: you talked about $5.5 billion. Was that what you had built your AUM up to? When at Lehman Brothers?
Yeah, well, when I started at Shearson Lehman Brothers, and when I left, it was Smith Barney, and I was a managing director of Citi Smith Barney. And at the time I left, it was organically grown, so it was myself, and then I had hired and mentored a team, and it was a combination of institutions, not-for-profits, and high net worth families or family
Wow.
offices. Yeah, so when I left, and I do, I wrote a book about a lot of my experiences in life and business that I released last year, and one of the things that occurred to me in writing this book was that I had never ever been referred one piece of business by the firms I was with. Never. Never was I like, hey, this client came to us and they need an institutional advisor. And I was designated as one of the people who dealt with larger, more sophisticated clients, but I never was referred anything by any of the firms I was with. It was actually a blessing in disguise. I also never had partners. I never had, we called it split business. I never had financial advisors, sending me business. It was just all organically grown with a team that I mentored. And some of those significant people are still with me. God knows why, all the things they've been through. But yeah, so it was organically grown with a desk and a phone starting in the World Trade Center.
Wow.
And then referred, as I became more successful, clients were happy. They would refer us in to the, story I told earlier. And yeah, and so when I left to go independent, I joined one of the largest RIAs in the country. They had kind of insurance roots. And that was August 31st, 2008. So my team followed me. All of the clients followed us. And Citigroup instantly sued us. And if you think about the timing, August 31st, 2008, a
That
month
was
later,
brutal.
yeah, we were in our second worst financial crisis in history. So it was it was challenging, we'll say that. So
And what year did you open up LVW?
2011. So I spent from late 2008 through early 2011 battling with Citigroup. They ultimately, they put a TRO on me, a temporary
Oh,
restraining
I've had
order.
one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what it was, but I had one placed on me. I never even had a verbal complaint in the industry, so it was pretty shocking. And they had like 13 counts against me and my team. And the TRO was instantly thrown out by the courts, but they then came back with a lawsuit, and the lawyers that I had to hire said, don't worry, they're going to settle. This will never go to arbitration. Well, they were wrong, and it went to arbitration, and it took, I don't know, 24 months to get it all sorted out. And FINRA came back and said, look, these people won and Citigroup lost, and Citigroup was fined for discovery failure, but I still was stuck with a lot of legal fees. And then I negotiated an exit from the RIA I was with, and they were in financial trouble. And I started LVW. So that was October of 2011.
Now, I hope this question isn't rhetorical from what you had just said, but did you bring clients over with you from to LVW when you founded it?
Yes, but what happened was, we had $5.5 billion when we joined this large RIA, and Citigroup sued us. By the time I formed my own company, which is, I'll make this the succinct part of it. If you were an institution and your advisor was sued by the largest bank in the world at the time, and they won, that was great. They won. But you also realized that they had joined a failing RIA, you probably would go to RFP. So we had, 3/4 of the business go to RFP, and I had to rebuild it. And so with my excellent team of people, we rebuilt the business, and we focused it more on multi-generational wealth and institutional wealth. So that's kind of where we are today, a more profitable, growing business, but a smaller AUM base than we were.
Let's talk about that. So LVW, and we get our information from mostly discovery data. So if I'm wrong on that, please feel free to correct me. You guys are at over 2 billion now of AUM. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 2 or 2.3, something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And tell me about the growth there. How many total advisors do you guys have? How many teammates do you guys have there?
Well, we have, let's see. We have a multi-generational team, which was really important to me. So one of the things that, I'm giving a talk tomorrow to a bunch of RIAs in Tampa, Florida, and I was thinking about, what am I going to talk about? And I'm going to talk about the power in failing. Because one of the powerful and transformational things about failure is if you do a whole postmortem on what caused the failure, you hopefully learn something from it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I learned was that I did not want to have a business that could all go to RFP at the same time, but that we were really good stewards and good investors. And so we built, LVW is a firm where we partner with a lot of people to, kind of integrate solutions around multi-generational wealth. So we have, I think, 18 or to 20 institutions that are small now, small to mid-size. And then we have mostly wealthy families that our team advises to. So we have, you just think this through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have, I think, 7 advisors and a staff of 23. I might be getting this wrong, so I'm sorry. I didn't really think about it before it came on, but we have had a wonderful chief operating officer who has been with us for 10 years. She just announced her, I'm not going to say retirement because she isn't going to another job and she isn't the kind of person who would retire, but she did a wonderful job with our team and our culture. We've never done a transaction, really. We're all organically grown. Joe Zappia is a partner in the firm. Jeff Wagner, who started with me, I think, when he was 20 years old as an intern, is also a partner.
Wow.
So Joe joined me he has a background from Wells Fargo. And at the time Joe joined, I really knew, this was before we hired our chief operating officer. It was early on, though. I knew that I needed somebody who was a complement to me, because the other thing you learn when you fail epically is what you really are not good at. And I was not good at operations, process, technology, and Joe is. So compliance. I'm not going to say I wasn't good at compliance. I never had a compliance issue. I was just sued by the largest bank in the world, but I will say that I did win. So, so he came on board and he brought a skill set that I didn't have and complemented what I was doing. So, and he's continued to do that. And now we are hiring, our next generation chief operating officer, which is great. So every single client has more than one advisor, has a team around them, and we attempt to solve the whole problem, or at least be the call that people place when they have a financial or otherwise related problem. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I always say in lawsuits nobody wins, right?
Right.
I mean, I know that when
was true in business deals, nobody wins.
Right.
Business deals and lawsuits.
Because I remember when I had my TRO, God, what was that? 2014. I mean, we ended up winning, but it was a 7-figure bill to the attorneys. A very low 7-figure bill, but we still lost. And then we had 6 weeks of downtime on everybody that we had brought over that couldn't originate. I mean, that in itself was probably a couple $1 million of revenue or that we couldn't partake in. So and whoever says, when people say, failure is not an option, I go, you know what? Please don't ever say that around me. It is absolutely an option. It's not an option we like exploring, but nobody's perfect, and it does happen. Yeah.
Well, I think you have to figure out, like I said, I did a deep radical postmortem on my failures around both my exit from what was Smith Barney, now Morgan Stanley, and then, the joining of the large RAA and then negotiating out. In order to start LVW, I had to do a deep dive on what went wrong. And it became the strategic kind of vision and the business plan, right? The document around every single thing that was major I will say that I did wrong. So it's pretty foundational to learn from that stuff, but it's painful. It's hard to look at something and say, gosh. And one of my very good friends said to me in the process of negotiating my exit from this RIA, it was tough, and I just was kind of beating myself up about it, which I've learned not to do, which is part of the book I wrote. But he said, Lori, don't beat yourself up. You just weren't smart enough. And it was so true. I wasn't smart enough. I just didn't know. And now I do, though. Now I'm a really good person if a client's going through a transaction. Like, we have clients that sell businesses or pre or post monetization events. I'm so much better than I ever could have been because I've been through all that stuff,
Right.
So you have to kind of look at it. It can be totally transformational, or you could just turn into a turtle. You can just turtle and go the other way. It can be one or the other. I hope people take something from this, really just look at what happened, look at it closely, and try to not do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I am curious. So now you guys have a staff of around 23. Back in 2011, when you opened the firm, how many people did you bring over with you?
It probably wasn't that much smaller, honestly, and that was the one thing that I say, I never, even though we had all these financial issues, right? We were sued by the largest bank in the world at the time. Mike referenced the legal fees. They were enormous. We lost all these revenues that went to RFP. I never laid anyone off. I never cut anyone's salaries. I just didn't, because I had really good people, and I didn't want to also lose the people. I knew we would build the business back. And so I kept those folks on. So our headcount, I don't think, has grown that much. I just think people are doing different things. Technology has allowed us to, be more productive in certain ways. And I think we have really smart people who are very hands-on with the clients in the soft skills and the smart skills that you need in this industry. And if you can automate and make everything else more productive, then, you're doing the right thing for the client. So I don't really think we added a tremendous amount of headcount. I think we've added more skilled people, though, for sure.
That's fantastic.
Let me ask you this: Did and obviously you guys had lost 75% of your business there, and you brought your team over. I mean, that's admirable, going through that burn, right? Mm-hmm. While you're, while you guys are in rebuild process.
It's a long history of doing that, though. One of the things I learned very early on as a mom, Wall Street, you have babies, you've heard the phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I needed to build a team. I needed to mentor people. I needed to give up cash flow, or I couldn't have been a mom or a wife, or I couldn't have done what I did. So I had a really good team of people. And I said that through the lawsuit and the postmortem, I learned what I really was terrible at. But I always kind of knew, you're not good at this kind of stuff. You fly at 30,000 feet. You really need people around you who can be more detail oriented and, technology oriented, whatever. So early on, I mentored a team. I mean, really early on. And that's how I grew. And I gave up my own cash flow to do it. And I would say this to you and Ashley, that in 2020, Father's Day 2020, I lost my husband very suddenly, young. We were married for 30 years. Wow. Yeah, it was brutal. And I was out of the business. This is not an exaggeration. Anyone that works at LVW knows I was out of the business for 2.5 years. Wow. The business ran completely without me. You could call me useless overhead. I mean, I didn't do anything. And when I came and I came back and kind of re-engaged in life and the business, I realized it did what I always wanted it to do. It ran without me. And that's a real problem in our industry that most, there aren't succession plans in place. It's older, still very male dominated business without a multi-generational team. Generally speaking, I'm not saying all businesses. I'm just saying there's a lot of RIAs that don't have a multi-generational team or the ability to take the founder out, completely out. I was out and run. And so these are things that I feel like in a way, my walk has been a little bit different being a mom early on and having a young family and having a successful business and having to figure it out. So when Ron, my husband, when he died, I would never, the things that happen in life, you never contemplate. If you were shown your whole life, you might not sign up for it, but I am really blessed in this kind of strange way to look back at this and say, gosh, I was able to go and heal and move through this, and the business ran without me. So we're at a different phase now in the business where I'm focused more on business development and the investment side and growing it. And I really don't do anything day by day. And it's really, so I'm kind of at my highest, best place, and other people in the business, that's my goal as the founder and the CEO, to get everybody in their highest and best place. And so you have to make the right strategic hires, and you have to be able to assess your talent, and you have to put them in a place where they can grow if they want to. So that's kind of what we try to do.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Gosh, 2020 was just a couple of years ago. And so, thank you.
Yeah.
Ashley and I, we've worked together now for going on 7 years. And so, my previous company, that we had sold in 2020, I've always had the benefit of having my twin brother as my business partner, and I'm a sales biz dev guy. And Ashley and I have always been, in the business development role, as we've gotten to work with one another. And my twin brother, he's handled all the other pieces, right, with technology and, law, legal, and everything, and everything in that area. And so, I commend you for having to, I've always had him as a pillar to rely on, right?
Yeah, that's great.
And so I commend you for having for doing this on your own, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what that would have had to have been like for me.
Well, thank you, I guess, but I just think, it is that kind of necessity is the mother of invention. And then I would say this to people, especially younger women, it's a great business, but it is kind of lonely, and now there are mentoring groups and there are more people that look like you that you can relate to. But back when I started, there was really nobody that I looked around and said, wow, this person's like me. They're balancing their career. There probably were people, but I didn't know who they were. They weren't in my sphere. And I was a top producer, in all these kind of Wall Street firms. And I would go to the, directors advisory group or whatever the big top award groups were. And I'd be, people would ask me, whose assistant are you? Or they'd look at my husband and say, where do you work? So there wasn't really anybody that I could really relate to. But I knew, I would say this to people who might be listening to this that are younger, you have to set your priorities. You just have to. And you have to know what those are. And you have to know who you are, because if you don't know those things, you're going to be swinging in the wind, and you're never going to be quote unquote successful. But more importantly, you're never going to be at peace, because there is all this pressure in our society to do everything perfectly and everything right. And it's just such a fallacy. You have to choose, and you have to find good partners or good people, and you have to mentor them, and you have to give up something. You cannot have it all. it's not, there's no such thing as that. Or one of my friends says you can't have it all at the same time. You can't do it. I was focused on my family. Well, actually, it kind of went like this. I was focused on my personal health first. I was a marathon runner. And I always was like, if I'm not healthy, then I can't be a mom. And then I was focused on my family, my boys, and then my career. It really was that order. But I didn't belong to clubs. I didn't travel except outside of my business travel. I didn't do all of these things. I didn't have a life outside of those three things. Those were the lanes I was in. So I chose, and I think it's the advice I would give anybody, you're going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be miserable. I always feel like I'm not really doing the best job as a parent, or I'm not doing, you're going to beat yourself up about things and you're not going to be really living. So I just took all the distraction out. I just was like, I can't do all this other stuff. I can only do this,
Right. I think that's beautifully said too, because I totally agree with you. I feel like society these days, especially on younger generations, puts so much pressure on everyone to do everything, be everything, and be the best at everything. And it's really impossible to do. You really have to focus on, what you're good at, or make a choice of what you want to focus at. Otherwise you will expand yourself and totally drain yourself.
And what people are seeing when they're looking at, everybody doing everything perfectly, is fake.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist, So the standard that our kids are holding themselves to, or people in general, it's just ridiculously impossible. So it was kind of a blessing. My husband, believe it or not, was in the cell phone business. He was in the business when the cell phones were like, started out like this, and then, so we were always connected, but we weren't, we never had phones at the dinner table. We never had, our kids just weren't connected like that. We had a house on, a lake, and they grew up fishing and skiing, and not in front of a television or in front of a phone. And if kids came over, I would just confiscate their devices. I wouldn't let them, like,
Good
if
for
you
you.
guys are friends, you're going to talk to each other. You're not going to be on your phone. So I don't know. I think it's just choices and getting distraction out. And, there's a lot of distraction in our world now. It's harder than it was even then. It just is. But
So I do want to highlight a little bit on your book. So your book, Running with Grace, it's a bestseller. You just published it last year. Can you tell us, what it's now hearing more of the story, I can kind of think of what inspired you to write this book, but can you share a little bit about, what inspired you to write this book, and, the key message you hope readers find within your book?
Yeah, so I started writing the book. It really wasn't a book. It was more like a journaling exercise, that I'd never, so I will say that someone just before I got on with you guys said to me that the book is she said it's such a positive message. It leaves people with a lot of hope, and, shows resiliency. And I hope that's what people get from it, because that was the intent of it. But it was a journaling exercise. So I lost my husband in June of 2020. He left me with my black lab, Grace, and she ran with me every day during, this was during COVID. And then I lost her very suddenly a year later. So the book is called Running with Grace, which is a double entendre.
Really cool.
And then I lost my mom suddenly in 48 hours. My mother last year, she was my best friend. She'd been my longtime assistant. And this book was a bunch of journaling. And I realized, before my mom died, I realized this had shaped itself into something more than a bunch of journaling. So my younger son and I edited it. And then I gave it to a few really trusted people. And I said, what do you think of this? And all three of them said, we think that you should publish it. So then I hired I independently wrote and published the book, but I hired professional editors and content editors and a legal team so that I could talk about Citigroup, for example, like all the things that I could legally talk about. And then I changed names and people in the book, but they're all true stories. I just changed certain names and circumstances because to the point of the book, it's not about other people. It's got a lot of life lessons in it, but basically life isn't fair. It's not perfect. It's difficult. And one of my, friends in the industry calls it the iceberg illusion. You see these people and they're perfect and everything looks perfect. But when you get underneath, you see there's a lot of depth. And if you allow life to be transformative and you allow, failure, tragedy, losses, and the good stuff to shape you, you become wiser and you can pay that forward. So the book was really a big philanthropic project in the end because it's not going to replace my day job. But I look at it that way because I think people are inspired by it and they're like, wow, if this person could get through that, or they take a bit of wisdom from it. If you go out and you kind of read the reviews and things about it, it's very gratifying because it's done what I wanted it to do. I never thought, oh, I'm going to write a book that's going to be a memoir. Who cares? I was like, no. But it just kind of was shown to me like, this is the book. So anyhow, that's the story of it. But
That's amazing.
That's really cool. And I got to tell you how refreshing it is to, interview somebody on our podcast. And to your point there, a lot of the guests that we have are men, right? We interview mostly, managing partners, CEOs, or chairmen of RIAs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you, I generally, internally get very excited when I see that we're interviewing, that when we're interviewing, a woman in our industry on our podcast, because the interviews are just so much more interesting. And maybe we'll have to edit that, Ashley. Maybe we'll have to mark that clip. Well, no, in all seriousness, if anybody tells us to go back and say, what was the favorite podcast that we've done? I pick the top three. I think I would say that two of the top three, or if I pick the top five, I say four of the top five were when we interviewed, women leaders in our organization in this space. I got to tell you, it's refreshing, and everything that you've shared today is they're great things for people to hear, right? Because I can tell you that, in a male dominated industry, it's like, oh, it's usually, yeah, everything was great, and and even if it wasn't right, and they're trying to show resilience, I sometimes feel it's a lot more of talking about,
success.
yes,
the successes.
Yeah. Talking about the
it's
success.
all about, look at how big this fish is, and we didn't see all the other ones that, this is the one that we caught. It's true of everything, though. When you can get to the heart of it and you can show, I hope that, younger people, women and men who are listening to you are inspired by it, because they're like, look, it is hard. It's a hard business, but it's a great business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can coach and mentor people and you can kind of pay it back, it comes back to you in spades. Like the story of me exiting the business, it's painful. It was a painful part of my life, but I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that I could build a business and I have the people that I have that could, actually do what they did every day in my absence. And, that's something that we need to solve for in the industry. And so I think, those kinds of things are important to share with people, and you should get mentors. If you can find a mentor and you can find people that, are experiencing some of the same things. Or for me, I look back and, I'll leave you with one really kind of quick story about, I said earlier, I never got a referral, never got a piece of business from any of the firms. I didn't. And you could get bitter and angry about that, or you could be like, oh, I was discriminated against, which I kind of was. But, you could say all these, crazy. I do write in the book, stories about some of the outrageous things, but I'm not bitter about it all. Actually, I feel like very lucky and grateful for this career. And about a week and a half ago, a gentleman, Jim Simons, died. He was a brilliant mathematician. He founded a firm called Renaissance Technologies, and he was part of my walk. And he hired me and my team at Stony Brook University. We managed the foundation for a while before they built an internal staff. So they were one of our clients. And he hired me objectively, hired a young woman because he thought I was smart and I was prepared and I understood their portfolio, which is pretty complicated. But I had so much, grace paid to me too. Like the fact is I was in the room with Jim Simons, who taught me a lot, and he hired us and when he died, he was 81. He was a luminary, So this business has been great to me. And, I could live in the things that were unfair, but that's really not living.
Right.
And that's not looking at the whole picture. So.
Yeah. And shifting gears a bit there, let me ask you a question about the future of LVW, right?
Sure.
What do you see is in the future and the vision of 3 to 5 years out of your firm? And do you have a G2 in place there? You mentioned a G2 as on the COO front. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, we have a next generation team of advisors and operations people and other professionals. And so it's a pretty young business, and it reflects our client base because we don't have an old client base, but we do have multi-generational wealth. So if you have that, your business has to reflect what the clients look like. So, our clients have children and grandchildren. And so my hope is that we'll continue to, exist another 30 whatever years. And I think we will. And I don't have any plans to exit the business, but I know I have the freedom to do some other things. It's clear that I do. And I think my highest use and best use is also in the area of business development and getting the word out of what we do, what makes us different. But I'm not needed day by day, like I said. So I think we'll continue to grow. I think we're going to continue to grow in the areas that are not for profit and things that we care about. Education, access to education, the arts, health and wellness. That's kind of what our client base kind of reflects our values and our culture and who we are. And I think that's the other thing I would say about a lot of firms that have grown. They've grown by mergers and acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
It might look good on the surface. It's hard because you're meshing a lot of different value sets and cultures. And that's one of the things I learned in my own walk and having to unwind myself from a not so great situation is that my values and what I cared about and the firm that I joined, they were at odds. We were different people. And that was probably the basis for the failure. So I want to continue to grow, the business, of course. And I want to continue to add great people that fit with our culture and our team. But I don't have this grand plan to do a bunch of it. We haven't done acquisitions, and I don't know that we will. We might. But I would think of it more like acquiring talent than acquiring AUM. So anyway, we certainly have been tested enough. I think my other advice to people listening would be stress test your business. Yep. Think about what would happen if the key people are out. Think about what would happen if you stress test it financially. Like, what would happen under this scenario or that scenario? What do you have concentrated risk in your own business? We talk to clients about not having concentrated risk. I clearly had concentrated risk when I, left Smith Barney and, kind of did this transition because, I had a business that virtually RFP'd overnight. So we don't have that anymore. So we stress tested around the markets and around how much beta do we have and what happens if credit spreads widen out or it's not about what happens if a client leaves. we don't want clients to leave, but we don't have the same kind of risks in the business. So we just want to continue to grow it in a smart way. We don't need to, we don't need to do anything crazy. We just have to continue to do what we're doing.
Really cool.
Oh.
Well, I know we have a hard stop today, Lori, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your incredible journey and insights with us. I know that your wisdom has inspired me, and I know it's inspired Mike, and I know it will undoubtedly inspire our listeners. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful, touching story with us.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to meet both of you. It's been
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the What Matters podcast. Stay curious, stay informed, and join us next time as we continue to explore the exciting world of wealth management and beyond. Thanks so much, everyone.